If your creative push has helped you, you can help the show by becoming a patron on Patreon. For $20, $10, $5, or $1 a month, you can not only show your support of the podcast, but also do so much to help to cover all the costs. Head to yourcreativepush.com/Patreon to find out all of the goodies that you can get when you become a patron at each of the levels, and thank you in advance for helping this show. Your Creative Push, episode 194.
Art in all its forms is kind of like a rebellion, so looking for guidelines is kind of silly.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Amanda Stalter. Amanda is a self-taught artist from Southern California. She began creating art in the spring of 2014, and shortly thereafter began exhibiting her work in local galleries. Now residing in Brooklyn, New York, Amanda has been featured in magazines, books, and exhibited her work in both national and international galleries. And Amanda, thank you, first of all, for coming on the show. I was wondering, could we start out by you giving us kind of a brief bio, how you got to the point you are in your artistic career?
Yeah, sure. So I was living in San Diego at the time with my best friends, Arl and Kate, and I was a musician for most of my life, and I was working as a waitress just to pay the bills, and I really felt like I was treading water at the time. I couldn't find any other musicians to play with me there, and it was too hard to do it by myself because the equipment is just really expensive. So I was kind of stuck in one place. And one weekend I went up to visit my friend Craig Thornton. Craig runs Wolf's Mouth in LA, which is like, to me, too unique to put into words, but it's my closest reference would be it's an underground dinner party, and he makes like
cool.
Yeah, it's really amazing, but he makes these really stunning plates of food that look like works of art. Anyways, we're from the same town. He was a longtime friend, so went up to visit him, and he was sharing his journey with me and his beginnings, and it was so tough and heart-wrenching hearing where he came from and hearing how hard he worked to get where he was now, to get where he is now. It was completely mesmerizing. And his story, kind of similar to, I'm sure, what your podcast does, his story kind of gave me this insane epiphany because we both had similar roots. And that's when I realized that everything I wanted to be was like completely tangible. So in turn, I kind of also fell in love with him because I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Sort of a crazy romantic, but I ran home and I felt like this fire had been lit inside of me, or the treading water switch had turned off. So I went and I made this blueprint of my future, and I decided that I was going to start doing art because music, I just wasn't getting anywhere creatively. And after playing with a few canvases, my third attempt was a painting I did called Piece of Meat, and it was everything. It made me finally understand where I was really going and what I wanted.
So was it that one painting was like an aha moment, like an epiphany, where you're like, this is it?
I feel it was more like talking to my friends that was the epiphany, because sometimes I think in life you have all these thoughts and then you just feel like you get slapped in the face with realization, and talking to him kind of like, I don't know, just having someone that came from the same place that I came from and was also an artistic person, and then just seeing that they just did it, and they just worked hard and did it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's that easy, like I'm just not doing it. So
right.
I think that's what really like changed my whole mindset. And then the painting itself, that was just like the kind of reward, where it was like I went home and I was just like, I'm doing it. And then I created that painting, and it was just like I felt like I accomplished it. I didn't love it. I think most artists don't love exactly the stuff they do all the time, but it felt good, and I was like, that's it. That's all I have to do is just do it. not to make a Nike quote, but
it's a good one though. It's an important one.
It is.
I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying, and it's that idea of you have these ambitions or these kinds of thoughts in your head that you almost don't even allow to come to actual thoughts, you know, like you just kind of push them aside because you're like, no, people don't do that. People don't, you know, pursue an artistic career. And then when you see somebody that's actually doing it and get to interact with them or hear their story, you're like, oh, holy shit, people actually do this. And it's really that simple as just do it. You just have to take that first step down that path, and then you get to become that thing, not right away, but over time.
Oh, totally. And that's why I was so excited to do this podcast with you, because I kind of feel like that's what it's really pushing, you know, is just get out there and do what you feel like you can do.
Yeah, you're right. That's the whole point. Well, okay, so before you started that, did you kind of have a history of being an artist? Because you're very talented, and it's only been since 2014. Like, that's kind of insane to me. So did you have like a history before that of kind of being artistic?
I get that a lot. Yeah, I was always on the, how my mom likes to call it, street smarts. I had the artistic side of me, but I was a musician for years. That was my thing. And as far as like doing art, it was mostly just like playing around here and then. I never really tried to paint something. I didn't know anything about the art world. I knew everything about being a musician. So it was more like I pursued that for a very long time. But when it came down to it, and you know, I had that moment, it was kind of like I saw what was possible and what was in front of me, and I decided to go with a route that was tangible, because I kind of felt like my creative side was just dying. So,
right.
So when everything came down to it, I was really like, all right, let's do something tangible.
I like it. So would you say that like you were following what was the reason that you were following that kind of musician path? If you weren't, it just kind of felt like that's the path that you went down, or like that you decided to go down and then you just kept going?
You know, I feel like I really have two loves. I don't consider myself a painter or a musician just in one way or the other. They're both my passion, and I think it was, as a musician, I did that for so long because it was easier for me at the time to express how I was feeling and get out those emotions and be creative. And it was much harder because when I don't know, I had done it for so long and I just took to piano and guitar so much easier. So being a painter, it's like it takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. So it took much longer to express a feeling. Even now, I still don't feel like I fully express what I'm trying to say in my paintings, but it took so much longer to try and do a painting and have that, rather than like I could write a song in a minute and say exactly what I wanted to say. So I think that's why I stuck with music for so long. But, you know, I really wanted to make it my life. I really wanted to make it my career and something that I could do every day to be happy. So it was too hard to do that as a musician. So then I had to, which sounds crazy because it's so hard to be a painter, but that's when I took the turn to be a painter. It just seemed more tangible to do it as a living.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to do kind of what calls to you and what, like you said, seems more tangible. Did you have any fears like then when you made that switch? Like, what was that transition like when you found your passion, like you said, after that third painting? But leading up to that, what was that like?
I had so many fears. I am riddled with anxiety, so
we all are.
Yeah, so I think fear is always there, and I think something that a lot of artistic people can relate to is that I had so many aspirations of grandeur where I just like, you know, I knew they were possibilities. I'm a super stubborn person. So like, I was like, you can do anything. But because these ideas were so great, they really weren't something that I could do that easily. The idea, you know, it's like the idea of like, oh, you'll be an artist and make a living off of it. Like that's such a far ahead projection that I ended up not ever really getting anywhere with it. And, you know, it just became an idea really. So that was something that held me back, was just having these great ideas and then just kind of not ever really breaking it down to reality. So that was something that stopped me a lot. I also feel like another one that I had was, I have a lot of people in my life that were, you know, there's always the get a job and, you know, art and music aren't job sort of thing. So I had that a lot. And I had a person in my life that was pretty close to me that told me I wasn't good enough or that I wasn't doing it the right way. And it was so negative that it really stopped me from like focusing and figuring it out how to do it myself.
Yeah. 3 really big things there that, you know, they come up often, and it's, you know, it's so difficult, especially when somebody close to you is telling you. It's one thing when society as a whole tells you that, you know, art isn't a real job, and you need to go get a real job. And I understand all of that, but there's something else that happens when somebody close to you, you know, tells you that you're not good enough, you're never going to make it, or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever the comment that they say that just like echoes in your head over and over and over again. And it's a really tough thing to get by. How did you get past that?
I think for when someone that close to me was telling me those things, I made the decision that it was just outweighing making me happy. So I kind of started to overcome it by just doing what I really wanted to do. And then in that situation, because it was with, you know, somebody I was with. So during that situation, it became a little harder because it was almost like when I started doing what I really wanted to do, I got so much more pushback from it that I eventually just left that situation. And that was really, I think what was good about that. But I don't know. I think the biggest thing that made me get past it was realizing that the things I wanted were completely obtainable, and I just needed to set more realistic goals for myself. And you know, I wanted to be a painter, so I made a painting, and then I wanted to be in a gallery, so I contacted a gallery, and then it just kind of snowballed from there, where it was like I set all these little, as Bill Murray would say, baby steps, and then I you know, got to where I am now, which is insane when I look back, because it was only 3 years ago. So like looking back at, if I looked back at, you know, if I was in 2014 and like saw where I was now, there's like no way I thought that any of that would happen. So.
Right. Yeah. 3 years is, it's a short amount of time, but it's a really long amount of time too. We were talking, you know, setting New Year's resolutions, just thinking about how long a year is sometimes unrealistic, because a year is a really long time when you actually are going through it, trying to achieve something. Just going back to what you're saying, you need a support system, because especially when you start to go down this path of becoming an artist, becoming a fill in the blank, whatever your kind of creative passion is, it becomes you, and you become that. So you need the people around you to be a support system. And I like it. Just cut out the fat, you know, whenever they're not kind of in line with what you want to be. You know, get rid of them.
Oh, definitely. I think that was, well, you know, and you hear it so much, like, I have so many close friends or followers that would always say, you know, oh, turn that heartbreak into art, or, you know, whatever, you know, thing they say. 'Cause a lot of people do say, they'll say that art is like, that heartbreak is great when you're an artist. They'll say that it causes so much, you know, it's so much inspiration for your work. And a lot of that is true. Like, you do get more fuel for fire, and you do get inspiration from all the emotions you have. But what no one ever talks about is that you can only really access those benefits when you're removed from the situation. So just speaking for myself personally, I feel like it's, if you're in it, I have passion. I have equal amounts of passion for the things that I love. So when I'm with someone and they're telling me I'm not good enough, it just crushed me. I spent more time trying to make that person happy than I spent time on focusing on myself. So I really did just have to kind of cut out the fat, as you said, right, to be able to like use that emotion for inspiration. So
yeah, it sucks when you're kind of drowning in that type of, you know, sorrow. Well, actually, that made it sound like way worse. But when you're right, when you're smack dab in the middle of it, when you're going through those things, it does suck. And yeah, like you said, it's only in hindsight where you can actually like make something good out of it. But it does suck when it happens. Like it's almost never a good thing. It's not like, yes, I'm so happy that I'm going through this pain right now because it's going to turn into a wonderful painting or a wonderful song or a wonderful story.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard to see that. So
yeah, no one thinks that. It's like it's the worst. It's just all around the worst. And I think everyone's trying to be positive when they say, you know, oh, it's going to turn into the greatest painting or the greatest song. And so I always just kind of like, oh, thank you. But really, it's like, this sucks. Like,
screw
I don't
you. You want to trade places?
I can make a good painting without this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need this to be happening. But, you know.
You also, you mentioned that idea of aspirations of grandeur. And I really like that because I think it's really important. That's like a really important thing to have, is to have like really big, like audacious goals, like to, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
The tricky part though, which I think that you crushed, that you did really good on, is that you have to keep going. Like, even if it's like, it seems insurmountable, it seems like this thing that you can't achieve right away, you just have to like take those steps, like you did, those baby steps. And it's not just like having those ideas. It's okay having these ideas, but taking those, the first few steps to, you know, you want to be in a gallery, so you reach out to galleries. It's like that simple. But I think a lot of people think that they need this permission to, you know, they need somebody to reach out to them, but you have to take those little steps for yourself to get to those big audacious, hairy audacious goals, you know?
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I think that's the thing, is people, you know, like I know a lot of my friends are like, I'm going to be a famous musician, and they're like, I'm going to make it huge, and and they'll look to this like super future goal of like where they want to be, but nobody ever says like, okay, well, you need to go buy a microphone. So like, I feel like if you just take those small steps, it just snowballs and you just get there. And like you were saying about going into 2017, it's like a year is a really long time, but it's like, if you look back at a year, you know, if you just make those small steps, you can look back and be like, whoa, I did 365 things that I wouldn't have done unless I just did it. And now I'm this much further. So
no, it's so true. We just had our 1 year anniversary last week, and just looking, I replayed episode 0, which was like the first time I talked on the mic, and it was like the most embarrassing thing to do. But through that path of, you know, 365 days of doing a podcast, you know, you don't feel like you're progressing at all. Like, you feel like you're just doing the same thing from day to day, but it's putting in that time every single day. And then, like you said, looking back a year later, you're like, whoa. You like almost don't even want to look back. You want to just like kind of squint and look with one eye.
Yeah, there's some things that you don't want to see, but at the same time, you're like, wow, like that, I just, you know, like you said, a year later, a year full of podcasts, and like you have, you know, I saw that you were like #1 on iTunes and stuff, and like that's just so cool. And it's like it can feel repetitive, or it can feel like you're not making a difference, but really, it's when you look at it, you're like, damn, I did a lot of fucking stuff that's super cool. So I don't know.
Right. But thank you. But yeah, all you have to do is put in that time though. Like, that's the tricky part. Like you were saying, like you can think about these like big goals, like where you want to be in a year, but you actually have to go through the year. You actually have to do it every single day. And I think people lose sight of that sometimes. Yeah,
definitely.
I was wondering, do you have like either with your music or with your art, do you have like a best or worst moment that you could tell us about?
I think the worst for me ever was just the relationship thing, because that was something that I didn't foresee. I saw all these obstacles of like the parents saying that's not a real job, or I even saw the obstacles of like not being successful or getting into galleries. But I don't think I ever really saw it coming that somebody close to me would be like the biggest roadblock in what I was doing. So I think that was the hardest thing. I think it's really is just, you just have to like realize that you need to focus on yourself. And you had opened up that I lived in Brooklyn, and I did, for a second, but now I'm in Southern California again.
Oh, nice.
Because I actually have, I think, turned into a gypsy, where now I just completely run from every guy that I get close to, because as soon as that moment happens where I can feel that it's disrupting what I'm trying to create, then I just book it. So I think that was the hardest for me. And then as far as like the best, I feel like looking back at the 3 years, I feel like every single thing I've done is the best. Like this podcast is the best to me. Like if someone told me I was going to be on a podcast, I would be like, oh my God, that's insane. Or the first painting I did was like the best day of my life. And then getting into galleries was like the best day of my life. And then because I was in galleries, you know, someone wanted to write an article about me in a magazine. So that was the best day of my life. And it, you know, I feel like there's not just one moment where I think like, yeah, like that was it. That was like the best. I really feel like it's the thing that's the best to me is waking up every day and knowing that I get to do what I'm like fully passionate about for a living. And I get to spend all the time in the world just like really devoting myself to what makes me happy. So that I think is just the greatest thing ever for me.
I love it. What I love about your mindset is, and I think people forget to do this sometimes, it's like allowing those moments to be the best day of your life, allowing it to just be this awesome thing that you're currently doing, you know, and to be fully present in that moment and to be like stoked on that being the best day of your life. I think people forget to do that, to be so excited about what you're doing on this day-to-day thing. I think oftentimes people are too focused on that end goal, that big audacious goal that we were talking about, that you forget to let those, you know, 365 days to allow those days to be awesome, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Well, especially I think as an artist too, because it's a path that's never, people ask you all the time what your secret is or what you do and how you make sales and this and that. And I think the thing is that there's no rule book for being an artist in any form. And as a musician, a writer, a painter, like there's no rule book. There's no certainty of what is going to happen. So I think a lot of people do like that haven't made that step. I think there's a lot of people too that think that there's like this big award at the end. But really it's just like, even if it didn't work out, I'd get to say like, you know, look at all this cool shit. I'm never going to have kids because I don't want kids at all. But it'd be cool to be like, whoa, kids, look at all of this cool stuff I did when I was younger. You know, like I was in this gallery and in this book. So it's really more about, I think, just being happy with yourself and working towards that. If you're not happy, you're doing it wrong. Just right. Period. So
right. You should be doing something different for sure.
Right.
I completely agree. There is no rule book, and I think a lot of times people forget that's part of the journey because they're always waiting for, you know, to read that book that tells them how to do it. Like we were talking about needing permission. You don't. That's the entire purpose of the journey is figuring it out for yourself, because what worked for somebody else probably won't work for you. It might work, but it's figuring out your own niche and kind of forging your own path in that way. And that's like part of the fun of it, is figuring out things that work and having those victories and making that the best day of your life whenever something does work to your favor.
Oh, definitely. Well, and that's another thing too, is that art in all its forms is kind of like a rebellion. So looking for guidelines is kind of silly because it's supposed to be, you know, like you're supposed to be expressing how you feel and what you want the world to see. So trying to figure out what everybody else is doing and get in line with that is just silly. So
right, then it becomes a job. You're like clocking in and clocking out on somebody else's path, and it's probably not going to be working for you, and you're probably going to end up being unhappy with it too. So
yeah, you got to make it your own.
For sure. So do you have then, like, I know I'm going from talking about not having a rule book and, you know, it's being different for everybody, but do you have you figured out kind of like a formula for balancing your time?
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. I am a total workaholic. So as far as getting work done, like I devote myself to what I'm doing. So I work constantly. Like I have to turn down so many fun parties or going out with my friends or even eating dinner with my family at night. Like there's things that people get to do that you get a little bitter about, but I'm, in a dirty garage, like dirty, cold garage, like just sitting there painting by myself. And so as far as time management goes, like I just work all the time. I think the one thing though that is really important to me just for my health and like so that I have the strength to do all the things I need to do, I do make sure that I eat food, because that was a big roadblock in the beginning, as I would get so wrapped up that I would, drink a bunch of coffee and forget to eat breakfast. And so there was little time management things like don't forget to eat food, which was sadly a hard task for me to remember. But that's as far as my time management went. It was just like, make sure you sleep and make sure you eat food. But most of the time I'm just like, glamorously sweating in a garage, next to a heater and a jacket, like dusty old table. So,
right. I love it. Yeah. I think when you can start, like when you realize that you're missing out on stuff, like, turning down parties, or like yesterday, I didn't get to watch the football, the championship games, like, because I was doing work. I think when you start to notice like sacrifices like that, I think you're on the right path. I think that you can call yourself whatever it is that you're devoting yourself to, whether it's a musician, artist, podcaster, whatever it is. If you start to sacrifice things that you normally would have always done, I think that you can give yourself the little name tag that says, hi, I'm fill in the blank. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think it was one of my favorite quotes. I think it's Maya Angelou. I think she said, whatever you want to, this is going to be a horribly wrong quote, but she says, whatever you want to be great at and whatever you want to do, you have to devote yourself to it, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices to it. And I couldn't agree more, because I remember specifically it being 4th of July. And at the time I was living in Seattle in my apartment complex, and there was a bunch of kids, just a couple doors down from me that were like having beers and like a barbecue, and my windows were open because my apartment was hot, and it was like I could smell and just hear all of the great 4th of July stuff that was happening like 2 doors down from me. And they were like, come on, come hang out. And I had like a deadline for a painting. So I remembered like slamming my window shut and just being like, no, like you guys should go home. But yeah, you definitely have to sacrifice a lot for what you love. And hopefully your passion and your love for what you're doing outweighs the sacrifices you're making. So
yeah, for sure. What kind of patriot are you? Not hanging out on 4th of July.
No, I mean, I did go to a lake, like, I think a couple days later. I think I like just celebrated a different day. Like I went,
okay.
So I got the whole, like, ate a hot dog, and played with some sparklers.
Okay,
so.
Cool. So you made it up to America. All right.
I did. And I wore like an American flag shirt and made sure that.
Wow, you went overboard.
I went all the way.
That's awesome. Amanda, this is awesome. Before we let you go, do you have a favorite book or YouTube clip or anything else that you draw inspiration from?
I was thinking about it. I did some thinking about that, and the thing I draw inspiration from the most is music. And so I have a song for you.
Yay!
What a lot of people, this is a fun fact probably for the few people that will care, almost 90% of my paintings or my charcoal pieces are titled after song lyrics or song titles. And like my solo show I had in Seattle this last year, that every single piece I had in that show was a lyric from a song that I'm obsessed with. And there's this band called Devotchka, and one of my favorite songs they do is called Till the End of Time. And since I'm such like a hopeless romantic, I just always relate to this song. So I don't know. It's one of those songs where like the notes strum and then it just like rings into the marrow of my bones and it just like feels so good. So that's probably like when I start painting and put that song on, because I'll bring it up on YouTube and play it. And that's something that just like slays me every time.
Nice. And I think, well, I certainly can relate because I love music and that's part of what I do with my music videos. But I think that when you can find something like that, like music or even a TV show, like anything that really, like an audiobook, anything that brings you kind of this passion while you're doing your art, I think that you should definitely find a way to incorporate it into your art. I like how you use lyrics as your titles. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's, I don't ever tell anyone except for just now and, the thousands of people that will hear this, but I never tell anyone either because it like makes me giggle and I'm like, I wonder if anyone will ever be like, oh, and then maybe buy the art and then maybe go home and put the song on and look at it. Like I always have this weird, like, because I'll listen to a song on repeat sometimes when I'm doing a painting and be like, all right, put that whole feeling into this painting. So.
And then whenever you look at the painting, do you hear that song then? Like, do you have like, are they tied together then?
So much. Yeah. So much. It's great. There's a piece I did for Penumbra Gallery, I believe is how she pronounces it, but it's a really cool gallery in Portugal. And she did a ghost stories themed show. And so I did Bloody Mary because that was like the funnest one. Right. when I was a kid, that was like the scariest shit in the world.
So scary. I still won't do that, man.
Right. And so I did that piece, but when I was doing it, I was playing that song Strange Magic, and I just like repeated it the whole time. So now it's like kind of incorporated to be this like kind of creepy song for me now, when before it wasn't. So now it's like all
forever ruined.
Yeah, so now I'll hear that, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm into it. It gives me that little like adrenaline kick from how fake Bloody Mary was in the first place.
Nice.
It's fun.
I love it. Amanda, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today. And just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passion.
Sure. What I would say is don't be afraid of failing. Just a weird pop culture reference that I had was J.K. Rowling is one of my favorite authors, and she was a single mother and she was on welfare, and her first manuscript was rejected by all 12 major publishers. When I found that out, I was like blown away, and because now she's like one of the most recognized authors of our time. And so I think failure is a bad word. I think fear is the root of all evils, and it shouldn't be called failure. I think that I think it should be called attempts, because I don't think you're ever really failing until you stop trying. So I would say, if anything, to everyone is just don't be afraid to do what you love, because you'll realize in the end that there's no repercussions. In reality, is that you'll do something that you love and it's going to be amazing. So just don't be afraid to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that idea that the only time you're really failing is when you stop. It's so true. And yeah, there is no repercussion. It just, okay, you made a bad painting, throw it in the trash. You made a bad song, delete it, never play it again. Whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Light that shit on fire, start over. Like, your own internal fear is so much worse than what other people are going to think. Like, if you make a bad painting, someone might talk shit on it for a second, or there might be a couple catty people that have their comments, but in like a month, nobody's going to care. And if you make a great painting, people could talk about it for years. So you have to stop being afraid that like, one bad moment is gonna be the worst thing ever, because it's not. I think people truly and honestly want to be positive and they want to be supportive. I think that the negative things that people say or think, they're really fleeting moments. So you shouldn't be afraid that those things are going to happen, because they're really not going to last that long. And worst case scenario, fuck them and do what you want. So
perfect words to end it. I love it. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can find Amanda on Instagram. Her handle is Amanda Stalter. That's Stalter. On Facebook, she's Amanda Stalter Art. And we'll have links to everything that we talked about today at the show notes page, which is yourcreativepush.com/Amanda Stalter. And you also have something going on with a gallery at San Diego. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. One of my favorite galleries of all time is a gallery called La Bodega Gallery, and they're in San Diego, California. And they are currently doing a GoFundMe to make upgrades for their gallery because of the Oakland fire. So I really just want a shout out for them, because they give so much to the community, and I really hope that they get back as much as they give, because they're great people. So
cool. Excellent. We will we'll have that linked up then at the show notes page as well. yourcreativepush.com/Amanda Stalter. Amanda, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Amanda for coming on the show. Such a fun personality, and I really enjoyed talking with her. I want you guys to think about taking baby steps, and I want you to think right now about those big, audacious goals that you have, even if they are, these aspirations of grandeur. And I want you to ask yourself if you are taking steps right now towards that big goal, and really be honest with yourself. Do you want to be in a gallery? Okay, are you reaching out to galleries? Do you want more followers? Okay, are you putting your stuff online? Are you promoting it, or are you just kind of plopping it up there and waiting for people to come? Do you want to make money from your passion? Okay, are you taking the steps to get that done? Are you trying to sell some of your work? Are you trying to find a way to monetize it? Did you set up a Patreon account? Or are you waiting? And if you're waiting, what are you waiting for? And that might be a totally legitimate reason to be waiting. So I'm not saying that right now is necessarily the best time for you to be doing it. But if you don't have a good reason, if you're honest with yourself and you realize that you really don't have a good reason, you're just kind of waiting for something to happen, it's time to start taking those baby steps and start taking them today. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for somebody to come along to tell you that now is the time, because they won't. You have to start taking those steps. Mitch Bowler actually was talking about this on his latest episode of the Pencil Kings podcast with his guest, Kat Rose, who was actually also on this podcast back in episode 172. And they talked about baby steps and how easy it is to build daily habits when you have a much easier goal, a baby goal, if you will, like, working out for 2 minutes, or sending one email a day, or flossing one tooth a day. And I think if you can do that, you will get into this habit of actively moving towards your goal, and that big goal won't seem as daunting or as scary. And that doesn't mean that you only can do that one little baby step. It's just kind of building that habit and taking the fear out of moving towards that big goal. So we'll have that episode linked up at the show notes page, so you can go listen to that. If you need some more inspiration, if you need more inspiration after that, you can even go back and listen to Mitch's episode on this podcast, or Kat's episode on this podcast. I'll have all that linked up. But that is all I've got for you today. Go start taking those baby steps. Go and get your work done. And we will be here for you on Monday if you need that push again. On Monday, we have Matt Corr, who is the creator of Control Paint. You can find his stuff at mattcorr.com. That's MATTKOHR.com, or controlpaint.com, which is CTRL paint. Or you can go to the show notes page again, yourcreativepush.com/194. I hope you have a wonderful, productive weekend. I love you all, and we will see you on Monday if you need that push again. Bye, everybody. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.